The hum of the ships grew louder, reverberating through the ground beneath their feet. It was as if the very earth was vibrating with the energy of their arrival. The people, still paralyzed by fear and confusion, began to move slowly, gathering together in small groups, whispering amongst themselves. "What are they here for?" someone asked, their voice trembling. No one had an answer. It was as if the presence of the ships had frozen time itself, and the town was suspended in this moment of uncertainty. Then, just as the atmosphere seemed to reach a breaking point, a figure emerged from one of the ships. It was tall, impossibly tall, its body covered in smooth, dark armor that seemed to shimmer in the dimming light. Its movements were graceful, deliberate, and yet there was an undeniable sense of power in every step. The figure was unlike anything they had ever seen, and yet there was something almost human about it, something that made it all the more frightening. It stopped in the center of the street, its gaze sweeping across the gathering crowd. The people shrank back, their instincts telling them to run, but they were rooted to the spot, unable to move. The alien's voice came again, but this time it was different. There was an edge to it, a sharpness that made the hairs on the back of their necks stand up. "The children," it said, its tone now laced with something darker, more demanding. "Where are they?" A chill ran down their spines. The question was no longer simply curious. It was urgent, almost accusatory. And it was clear that the aliens already knew the answer. They had been watching. They had been waiting. But for what? The people of the town had no answers. They had no idea what the aliens wanted or why they were here. They could only stand there, dumbfounded, as the figure looked down at them, its piercing gaze studying them, as if trying to extract the truth from their very souls. Then, just as quickly as it had appeared, the alien turned and began walking toward the children. The crowd gasped, a collective breath held in fear. What was it going to do? Was it here to take the children? Were they in danger? Every second felt like an eternity as the alien advanced, its footsteps echoing in the silence of the town. The children continued to play, blissfully unaware of the peril approaching them. The adults, however, could do nothing but watch in horror. Time seemed to slow down, each second dragging on as the alien drew closer to the children. The people watched, their hearts pounding, their minds racing. What would happen next? What did the aliens want with the children? Were they here to invade? Or was there something else, something far more terrifying, that they had yet to understand? As the alien stopped just a few feet away from the children, it paused. It seemed to be studying them, its head tilting slightly as it observed them with a level of interest that sent chills down the spines of everyone watching. And then it spoke again, its voice cold and emotionless. "You do not understand," it said. "The children must be protected. They are the key to everything." The words sent shockwaves through the crowd. The humans had no idea what this alien meant. What could children possibly have to do with everything? But one thing was certain. They were about to find out. The sense of dread in the air intensified, and the people knew that this was just the beginning. The real question was, what would happen next? Would they be able to stop whatever was coming, or would the children be taken forever? As the alien turned and began to move back toward the ship, the people were left standing in stunned silence. The children continued to play, unaware of the danger that had just passed them by. But the adults knew that this was far from over. Something had just begun, and they could feel it in their bones. Something far darker was approaching, and they had no idea how to stop it. And so, with hearts heavy with fear and minds racing with unanswered questions, the people of the town waited for the next move. They had no idea what was coming, but one thing was certain. Their world would never be the same again. The ships were still there, hovering in the sky, their massive forms casting long, ominous shadows over the streets. The low hum continued to reverberate through the air, a constant reminder that something was not right. People had begun to gather in groups, exchanging worried whispers. Some had started to leave their homes, pulling their children close, trying to shield them from what was happening. But it was no use. The alien presence was too strong, too overwhelming. Everyone felt it. An unspoken sense of fear, of doom, hanging in the air. As the minutes passed, the tension only grew. The streets were eerily silent, with people hesitating to speak too loudly, as if they feared that even the smallest sound might attract the attention of the alien forces above. In the distance, a few of the children still played in the park, blissfully unaware of the danger that had come for them. The adults, on the other hand, were paralyzed with fear. They had no idea what to do, how to fight back, or even if they could do anything at all. All they knew was that the aliens had come, and they were asking about the children. Why are they asking about the children? Someone whispered nervously. The question was on everyone's minds, but no one had an answer. The aliens didn't seem hostile, at least not at first. They hadn't attacked, hadn't made any sudden moves. But their presence alone was enough to make people uneasy. They were too advanced, too powerful. What did they want with the children? Why were they so insistent? The silence was broken when another ship, smaller than the others, descended toward the ground. It landed with a soft, almost imperceptible thud, sending ripples through the air. The people held their breath, their eyes fixed on the ship, waiting for something to happen. The door to the ship opened, and a figure stepped out. It was another alien, but this one was different. It wasn't as tall as the others, and its body was sleek and silver, almost metallic. Its face was smooth and featureless, with no eyes, no mouth, nothing but a smooth surface. It moved with a fluid grace, its body shifting and shimmering as it approached the crowd. The people instinctively took a step back, but they didn't run. They were too frightened to move, too frozen by the unknown. The figure stopped a few feet away from them, its presence commanding attention. It didn't speak at first, simply standing there, scanning the crowd. The air seemed to grow heavier with every passing second. The people could feel their hearts pounding in their chests, their palms slick with sweat. What did it want? What was going to happen next? Finally, the figure spoke, and its voice was soft but clear, cutting through the silence like a knife. "You must understand," it said, its tone both calm and urgent. "The children are not your responsibility. They are the future." The words sent shockwaves through the crowd. The children, the future. What did that mean? Was this alien here to protect them, or did it mean something far darker? The people exchanged uneasy glances, each one wondering if they had misinterpreted the situation. Was this some sort of warning? Or was there something more to the alien's words than they could understand? The alien continued, its voice steady, but laced with an undeniable intensity. "The children hold the key. They are the ones who will shape the fate of your world. You cannot hide them. You cannot keep them from us." The crowd stirred, their confusion growing. Who were these aliens? What did they know about the children? And why was it so important? The tension in the air thickened as the people tried to make sense of the aliens' cryptic words. Then, without warning, another voice broke through the thick silence. This one wasn't from the aliens, but from a woman standing at the front of the crowd. Her voice was trembling, but her words were filled with determination. "What do you want with our children?" she demanded, her voice shaking but loud enough to be heard by all. "Why do you need them? What is this all about?" The alien figure turned toward her, its face still featureless but somehow conveying a sense of understanding. "It is not what we want," it said slowly, "but what must be. The children are the link to something greater than your world can comprehend. They are the last hope for your planet." The alien paused for a moment, as if considering its next words carefully. "Without them, there will be nothing left." The woman's face turned pale, and she instinctively took a step back. "No," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "You can't take them. We won't let you." The alien didn't respond immediately. Instead, it looked toward the group of children who were still playing in the park, unaware of the unfolding drama. The adults follow the aliens' gaze, their hearts heavy with fear. They had been trying to protect the children, but now it seemed they were powerless. The alien wasn't here to ask for the children. It was here to take them, and there was nothing they could do to stop it. As if sensing the hopelessness of the situation, the alien turned back to the crowd. "We do not wish to harm you," it said, its voice softer now, almost sympathetic. "But the children are the key. They are the only ones who can save your world. You must understand. There is no choice. The time has come." The people were left standing in stunned silence, their minds racing with 1,000 questions. What did it mean that the children were the key? To what? And why were they the only ones who could save the world? The questions kept swirling in their minds, but no answers came. All they knew was that the aliens had come, and they had come for the children. For a moment, the crowd stood frozen, each person grappling with the gravity of the situation. They had always imagined a world full of possibilities, of safety and peace. But now, in the face of these alien visitors, everything felt uncertain, fragile. The very future of their world seemed to rest in the hands of the children, and they had no idea what that meant or how it would unfold. As the alien figure turned and began to walk toward the group of children, the people instinctively took another step back, their fear growing. They didn't know what was coming, but they knew one thing for sure: their lives, their world, would never be the same again. The children, still playing and laughing, were unaware of the weight of the moment. But the adults knew that the time for innocence was over. What would happen to them? What would happen to the children? And most importantly, what did the aliens mean by the future? These questions lingered in the air, unanswered, as the alien made its way toward the park. The entire town held its breath, waiting for what came next. The alien continued to move toward the group of children, its silver body gleaming under the fading sunlight. The crowd remained frozen, too afraid to move, too shocked to speak. The once peaceful town, which had been filled with the sound of children's laughter, was now a place of dread and uncertainty. The alien's slow, deliberate steps seemed to echo in the hearts of every person watching. Time itself seemed to stretch, each second feeling longer than the last. The children, oblivious to the gravity of the situation, continued to play, their innocent laughter ringing through the tense air. But it was clear that things were no longer as they seemed. The alien's purpose had been revealed, though only in fragments, and its cold, unwavering pursuit of the children was impossible to ignore. The question lingered in the minds of the townspeople: why were the children so important? What could they possibly hold that was so significant to these otherworldly beings? The alien stopped a few feet from the group of children, its featureless face still unblinking. The air felt thick, as if the entire world had come to a standstill. The children, sensing something was different, paused their games and looked up at the alien. The adults stood at the edges of the park, their breath held, unable to intervene. Every instinct told them to run, to protect the children, but fear kept them rooted to the spot. What could they do? Against such beings, who appeared so far beyond them in intelligence and power, there was little they could offer. The alien's head tilted slightly as it studied the children. Its eyes, or what appeared to be its eyes, gleamed with a quiet intensity. It didn't speak immediately, but its presence alone was enough to make the humans feel the weight of the moment. The silence was deafening. Finally, the alien spoke, its voice calm yet filled with an underlying force. "The children are not just children," it said, its voice reverberating in the minds of everyone who heard it. "They are the last hope for this world, and many others. They carry the future in their veins, the key to unlocking the fate of your people. Without them, there is no future." A chill ran through the crowd. The alien's words, though cryptic, were clear in their gravity. It wasn't just a question of wanting the children. It was a question of necessity. The future of the world rested on their shoulders. The adults exchanged worried glances, fear growing in their hearts. What did it mean? The children were the key to the fate of the world. Those were the words the alien had said. But how could children possibly carry such weight? The alien seemed to sense the confusion in the air. It raised its arm, the smooth surface of its body gleaming under the light. Then, in one fluid motion, it pointed towards the horizon. There are forces in the universe far beyond your understanding, it continued, its tone growing more serious. For centuries, we have watched over your planet, and we have waited. The time has come for the children to fulfill their destiny. The people of the town stood in stunned silence, still struggling to process the alien's words. What destiny? What forces? The questions piled up in their minds, but they were paralyzed by a fear they couldn't escape. They had no answers. They had no idea what to do. The alien lowered its arm, its attention shifting back to the children. It knelt slowly as though showing them some form of respect. One by one, the children stopped playing, their innocent eyes wide with curiosity, and they began to gather around the alien. They didn't seem scared, perhaps because they didn't fully understand the danger surrounding them. They simply saw something different, something new, and they approached with fascination. The scene was both haunting and strange. The adults watched, their hearts in their throats, helpless as their children were drawn closer to the alien. Was this it? Was this the moment when they would lose their children forever? And then, as the children gathered in front of the alien, it spoke again, this time addressing them directly. Its voice softened, almost gentle, as if trying to comfort them. "You are special," it said, its tone carrying a warmth that contrasted with the coldness of its appearance. "The universe has watched you grow, and you have a role to play that no one else can. You will be the bridge between worlds." The children, still uncertain of what was happening, looked up at the alien with wide eyes, their expressions a mix of curiosity and confusion. One child, a little girl no older than 6, stepped forward. Her face was innocent and full of wonder as she asked, "What do you mean? What role do we play?" The alien paused for a moment, as if considering how to answer. Finally, it spoke again, its voice filled with solemnity. "You are the ones who will help us stop what is coming. There is a force in the universe, a dark one, that seeks to consume all. It has already begun to infiltrate your world, and only you can stop it. Your power, your innocence, and your connection to the earth will be the key to preventing it from destroying everything." The children's faces were a mixture of confusion and awe. The adults, meanwhile, were filled with a deep sense of fear and disbelief. How could their children possibly have the power to save the world? How could they even begin to comprehend such a responsibility? The alien stood up and turned toward the adults, its gaze sweeping over the crowd. "You will not understand all of this now," it said, its voice growing somber. "But soon you will. The children must come with us. Their journey begins today." A wave of panic rippled through the adults. "No," one woman cried out, her voice cracking with desperation. "You can't take them. They're just children. They don't know what you're talking about. You can't force them into something they don't understand." The alien's gaze remained calm, unyielding. "We do not force. We guide. The children will come with us willingly. They must." The woman's face flushed with anger, but she was powerless. The people around her, despite their desire to resist, knew deep down that there was no way to stop this. The aliens were here for something far greater than the townspeople could comprehend. Their children were involved, and there was no escaping it. The children, still unsure of what was happening, looked to their parents for answers. But the parents, too frightened to speak, only looked back at them, eyes wide with fear and uncertainty. The alien took another step forward. "Time is short," it said, its voice growing more urgent. "The dark forces are already on your planet. The children must be prepared. They are the only ones who can defeat it. Their journey begins now." The crowd held its collective breath as the alien extended its hand toward the children. There was no going back. The future had already been set in motion. And so, as the alien reached out, the children stepped forward, their small hands outstretched, not fully understanding what lay ahead, but trusting in the strange, comforting presence of the being before them. And in that moment, the fate of their world, and perhaps many others, hung in the balance. The alien ship began to hum once more, ready to take flight. The children, standing together in front of the alien, turned to look back at their parents. The faces of the adults were filled with a deep, unspoken sorrow, their hearts heavy with the knowledge that they had just lost something far more important than they could ever have imagined. And with that, the alien extended its hand, and the children began to follow. The world outside the small town was changing, and there was nothing anyone could do to stop it. The alien's hand hovered just inches from the children's outstretched hands. The moment seemed to freeze in time. The town's streets, which had once been filled with the sounds of children's laughter and the bustle of everyday life, now stood silent. Only the distant hum of the hovering ships could be heard, resonating through the thick, tense air. The children's faces, once filled with curiosity, had now grown serious as they stood at the edge of something unimaginable. They looked back at their parents, but no one could offer them any comfort or answers. The adults were paralyzed, unsure of what to do. The alien's hand finally descended, touching the small hands of the children. Its touch was surprisingly gentle, like the cool breeze of an early morning. There was no harshness in its grip, no violence in its movements. Instead, it was as if the alien was guiding them, leading them toward something they had never known but were meant to understand. The children, still confused but strangely calm, followed the alien's touch. They moved without hesitation, as though their instincts told them this was the right thing to do. For a moment, the town seemed to hold its breath, watching in stunned silence as the children stepped closer to the alien. The adults, helpless and desperate, could do nothing but watch as their most precious possessions were taken from them. They didn't know what the alien wanted or why it needed the children, but there was an overwhelming sense that whatever was about to happen was beyond their control. A father, unable to contain his fear any longer, stepped forward. His voice cracked with emotion. "No, you can't take them. Please, they're just children." His outburst echoed down the quiet street, but it went unanswered. The alien didn't even acknowledge his plea. Its gaze remained fixed on the children as they continued to walk toward it, their small forms shadowed by the towering alien presence. The mother of the little girl, the one who had stepped forward earlier, reached out as though to grab her child, but her hand fell short. The little girl, her innocent eyes filled with wonder, turned to her mother for a brief moment. The look in her eyes was one of confusion, but also a strange kind of peace. It was as though the child understood something the adults couldn't, something she was ready for. And then, just as quickly as it had started, the alien turned and began to walk back toward the ship. The children, now under its guidance, followed. The crowd remained motionless, paralyzed by the unfolding event, unable to process what they were witnessing. The alien ship, which had remained silent in the distance, hummed louder as it prepared to take off. The people in the town could see the ship's engines beginning to glow, their immense size casting shadows over the streets. Suddenly, the ground trembled. It wasn't violent or destructive, but a low, powerful vibration that seemed to shake the very foundation of the town. The air around them crackled with energy. People began to back away, fear growing as the reality of what was happening sank in. They couldn't fight this. They couldn't stop it. The alien had come, and it was taking the children. The alien turned its head toward the adults for the first time, its eyes glowing faintly in the dim light. "Do not fear," it said, its voice deep and resonating, though it carried a strange comfort. "The children will not be harmed. They are needed for what is to come. They will not be lost." Those words seemed to have little effect. To the parents, it felt like an empty promise. Not be harmed. How could they believe it? How could they trust these beings who had appeared so suddenly, demanding the most precious thing they had? Their children. As the alien continued to lead the children toward the ship, one child, perhaps sensing the growing tension, looked back over his shoulder. His eyes locked with his mother's, and for a brief moment, the two exchanged a silent understanding. The child's expression seemed to soften, and his mother's heart broke. This wasn't what any of them had expected. They hadn't prepared for this. They hadn't known that the future would come knocking in such a terrifying form. With another low hum, the alien entered the ship, the children following behind, their small forms dwarfed by the towering craft. The ship's doors closed slowly, sealing them inside. The hum grew louder and louder, reverberating through the streets, until finally the ships began to rise. They didn't soar away like a plane, but rather they seemed to float upward, silently, as though they were part of the air itself. The town, once alive with the sounds of everyday life, now stood in eerie silence. The people watched helplessly as the ships ascended into the sky, their shadows growing smaller until they were nothing more than specks in the distance. For a moment, everything seemed to stop. The world was holding its breath. The alien ships, now high above, shimmered like distant stars, slowly fading as they traveled further into the sky. The people below stood in shock, their minds racing. What had just happened? Had the children really been taken? Had the future of the world truly rested in their hands? And what would the world be like without them? The air felt colder now, the sky darker, as though something was missing. The weight of the moment hung heavy over the town. The townspeople knew that this wasn't the end. It was just the beginning. The aliens had said the children were needed for what was to come, but for what? They had no answers. They had no idea what kind of fate had been set in motion. Some of the adults began to cry, their sobs echoing through the quiet streets. Others stood in stunned silence, unable to process the magnitude of what had just taken place. For the first time, the town felt truly empty. The children, the laughter, the joy, everything that had once defined this place was now gone. But somewhere in the depths of their hearts, they knew that the children weren't truly lost. They were somewhere far away, about to embark on a journey beyond anything the adults could comprehend. And though the future was uncertain, the people of the town could only wait and hope that one day their children would return to them. As the final traces of the alien ships disappeared into the sky, the town was left in a profound, uncomfortable silence. The questions would never cease. The uncertainty would linger. But one thing was clear. Whatever had been set in motion today, it was something much bigger than they could have ever imagined. And as the world continued to turn, the people could only wait for the next chapter of this strange, terrifying, and mysterious story to unfold. The town remained eerily silent, the once lively streets now left with an overwhelming stillness. The alien ships, which had vanished into the sky, had taken more than just the children. They had taken the very essence of normalcy, leaving behind nothing but questions and fear. The people who had watched, helpless and heartbroken, could do nothing but stand in shock. How could they have been so powerless? What kind of future awaited their children? Where had they gone, and why? As the last traces of the ships disappeared into the heavens, the crowd began to stir. Some turned and left, their footsteps heavy with grief. Others still stood rooted to the ground, staring up into the sky, as though waiting for something, anything, to bring them answers. The entire town had become a monument to uncertainty, and no one knew what to say or how to explain the void left behind. In the midst of this chaos, one woman, the mother of the young girl who had approached the alien earlier, found herself unable to move. She stood there, her eyes wide with disbelief, looking at the empty space where her daughter had been only moments ago. The memory of her child's innocent face, full of curiosity and wonder, weighed heavily on her heart. Had she just lost her daughter forever? Or was this just the beginning of something far more complex than any of them could fathom? The streets, once filled with the chatter of neighbors and the laughter of children, now seemed hollow. The world outside was moving forward, but the people here felt frozen, stuck in this moment, unable to move on. What had they just witnessed? Was it a dream? Had aliens truly come and taken their children, just as the beings had said? The words echoed in their minds. The children are the future. The children hold the key. But what did that even mean? The future of the world rested in their hands, yet they were being taken away by beings from another planet. The adults who had fought so hard to protect their children now found themselves powerless, with no understanding of what was at stake. Was the alien telling the truth? Was it all really as serious as it seemed, or was there something more sinister at play? In the center of the town square, a few brave souls gathered, their faces drawn with worry. They were the ones who had the most questions, who refused to simply accept what had happened. They wanted to understand, to know what the aliens had meant when they said the children were the key. Some whispered, others spoke in louder voices, desperate to make sense of it all. "We can't just stand here," one man said, his voice trembling but filled with determination. "We need answers. We have to figure out where they've taken them. And why." The group nodded, each of them feeling the same mixture of fear and anger. They couldn't let the children go without a fight. Whatever this alien presence was, they couldn't just let it slip away. Another woman, who had been watching the ships disappear, turned toward the others. "What if they're right?" she said quietly. "What if the children really are the key to saving everything? What if we can't understand it now, but they can?" Her words were met with silence. The idea that their children, the ones they had spent their lives protecting, could be the ones to shape the future was too much to accept. It felt wrong. It felt like something out of a nightmare. One man, looking pale and anxious, spoke up, his voice breaking. "What if they're in danger? What if those aliens aren't saving them, but using them for something else? What if this is all part of some larger plan to take over our world?" The group looked at him, some shaking their heads, others considering the possibility. Fear, uncertainty, and hope all intertwined into a thick fog in their minds. What if the aliens weren't the saviors they claimed to be? What if they had other motives, ones that were hidden beneath their cryptic words? The woman who had spoken earlier, the mother, swallowed hard. "I can't just wait and hope," she said, her voice cracking with emotion. "I have to know. I have to find out what happened to her, to all of them." The group fell silent, the weight of her words hanging in the air. What could they do? What did they even know about the alien ships or their technology? How could they fight against beings who had the power to take their children without a trace? Suddenly, one of the men in the group, who had been silent up until now, stepped forward. He had been watching the skies, his eyes narrowing as he stared at the direction the ships had gone. "There's one thing we can do," he said, his voice steady and low. Everyone turned to him, hopeful, desperate for a plan, any plan. "There's a place," he continued, "a research facility on the edge of the mountains. It's secret, hidden from the public eye. It's been rumored to be studying alien technology for years. We don't know much about it, but it's our best chance. If anyone has answers, it's there." The group looked at each other, the uncertainty in their eyes slowly shifting to something else. Determination. They had to act. They couldn't just sit by and wait for more to happen. If there was a chance to find their children, to uncover the truth, they would take it. "Let's go," the woman said, wiping away the tears that had threatened to spill. "We have no choice." With that, the group of determined townspeople began to make their way toward the mountains. Their hearts were heavy, their minds full of questions, but one thing was clear. They couldn't let the alien presence be the end of their story. They had to know the truth. And they would stop at nothing to find out what happened to their children. As they walked toward the unknown, the town behind them seemed to hold its breath. The future of the world had just been thrown into turmoil, and only one thing was certain. The answers they sought could change everything. They didn't know where the road would lead them, but one thing was undeniable. They had to keep moving forward. The fate of their children and the fate of the world depended on it. As the group of townspeople ventured toward the mountains, the journey felt like walking through a dream, or perhaps a nightmare. Each step took them further from the familiar streets of their hometown into the unknown. The sun had begun to set, casting long shadows across the rugged terrain. The town, now far behind them, felt like another world. The quiet hum of the alien ships that had taken the children still lingered in their minds, an ominous reminder of what had transpired. The feeling of helplessness was still heavy on their hearts, but now there was something else: determination. Despite the fear that clung to them, the group pressed on. They had to find answers. They couldn't just let their children disappear without knowing the truth. The man who had suggested the secret research facility led the way, his knowledge of the mountains guiding them through the winding paths. As they trekked further into the wilderness, the air grew colder, and the trees became sparse. The mountain range was vast, its peaks towering high above them, cutting the sky into jagged pieces. It was easy to feel insignificant in the presence of such raw power, but they didn't have the luxury of doubt. They had made a choice. Their children, their futures, depended on it. The journey was grueling. The terrain was rough, and the night was drawing near, but the group refused to stop. The man in the lead, whose name was Michael, had grown more serious the deeper they went. His pace had quickened, and his eyes darted nervously toward every rustle in the trees. "We're close," he muttered under his breath, almost to himself. The others followed, their faces lined with exhaustion and fear, but their resolve was unwavering. As they neared the base of the mountain, a sense of unease settled over them. It felt as if the world had become quieter, more oppressive. The wind whistled through the trees, but there were no sounds of wildlife. No calls from birds or rustling of small animals. Everything was still, too still. Finally, after what felt like hours of climbing, they reached a clearing. In the center of the space was a structure, tucked away, hidden behind overgrown trees and vines, but unmistakably man-made. It was a large metallic building, its surface sleek and reflective, yet it had an old, almost abandoned look to it. The entrance was obscured, but the faintest glow emanated from inside. A sign stood near the door, partially obscured by foliage, but one word was clear: research facility. The group gathered around, exchanging nervous glances. This was it. This was the place they had been seeking, the one place that might hold the answers they desperately needed. Michael stepped forward, his hand hovering over the door, then pausing. "Are you sure about this?" he asked, turning to the others. There was no time for second thoughts. The woman who had lost her daughter, Rachel, stepped forward, her voice steady despite the fear gripping her. "We have no choice. If there's a chance to find out where they've taken our children, we have to take it." Michael nodded, pushing the door open. The group entered cautiously, their footsteps echoing in the dim light of the facility. The air was thick with a strange metallic scent, and the hum of distant machinery vibrated through the floors. It was quiet, too quiet, and there was an eerie stillness that settled over them as they moved deeper into the building. The hallways were narrow, lined with doors leading to unknown rooms. Some of the doors were marked with codes, others with symbols they didn't recognize. As they moved further, the group's nerves began to fray. What was this place? Why had it been hidden away like this? At the end of the hallway, they found a large door, slightly ajar, with a faint light spilling from within. Michael glanced at the others, whom nodded in silent agreement. Together, they pushed the door open and stepped inside. The room was a stark contrast to the dark, silent corridors they had walked through. It was brightly lit, and the walls were lined with monitors, each one showing various pieces of data, numbers, symbols, and strange images that didn't make sense. In the center of the room stood a large table, covered with wires and cables. Several computers hummed quietly, their screens flickering with activity. But what caught their attention most was what lay beside the table, a large cylindrical container, glowing faintly with an eerie blue light. It was clear that it wasn't just a piece of equipment, it was something far more significant. The container seemed almost alive, pulsating softly as though it were breathing. Rachel's heart raced as she stepped forward, her eyes locked on the glowing container. "What is that?" she whispered, her voice trembling. Michael's face had gone pale. He didn't have an answer, but it was clear that he recognized it. "I don't know, but we're about to find out," he muttered. He motioned for the group to approach cautiously. As they drew closer, the door to the room clicked shut behind them. The sudden noise made them all jump, but before anyone could react, a deep voice rang out, echoing around the room. It wasn't coming from any of them. It was coming from the walls, from the very air around them. "You should not have come here," the voice boomed, cold and commanding. Everyone froze. A strange, unsettling chill swept over the group. The voice was not human, but something far more terrifying. It resonated in their bones, and they could feel its weight pressing down on them. Rachel's breath caught in her throat as she tried to comprehend what was happening. Who was speaking? What was this place? From the shadows, a figure emerged. A tall, imposing figure that seemed to shimmer in and out of existence. It was humanoid in shape, but different, alien. Its face was hidden beneath a hood, and its form seemed to ripple, like a mirage in the air. "You have no idea what you are dealing with," the figure continued, its voice echoing again, more menacing now. "These children are not yours to protect. They are part of something much greater than you could ever understand." The group took a step back, a wave of fear washing over them. The truth they had been seeking was suddenly more terrifying than they could have ever imagined. The alien figure stepped closer, its presence overwhelming. "You should have never known about them. Now you will pay the price for your curiosity." The lights flickered ominously, and the room seemed to pulse with an energy that threatened to explode. The group stood frozen, hearts pounding in their chests. What was this place? What had they just walked into? And more importantly, what had they just unleashed? The answer to their questions seemed closer than ever, but it came with a terrifying realization. The truth they were seeking might be more dangerous than they could ever imagine. And now, it was too late to turn back. The room seemed to close in around them, the air thick with tension. The strange alien figure loomed before them, its form shimmering as if it existed between worlds. It was like nothing they had ever seen, a being that defied all logic and comprehension. Every instinct in them screamed to run, but they couldn't. Their feet were frozen in place, their bodies gripped by an overpowering fear that came from knowing they had stumbled upon something far beyond their understanding. The alien's voice cut through the stillness again, its tone now laced with menace. "You should never have come here," it repeated, each word heavy with the weight of something ancient and ominous. "The children are not your salvation. They are the beginning of a new era, one that is beyond your control." Rachel felt a cold sweat bead on her forehead as the creature's words sank in. "Not your salvation." The words echoed in her mind. She had always thought of the children as the key, the hope for the future. But now, standing before this alien being, she realized that her understanding of everything was wrong. They were not here to protect the children. They were here because something much darker was at play. The figure raised a hand, and a soft hum filled the room. Suddenly, the walls lit up, showing images of the children. They were no longer in the town but floating in a vast, sterile space, their faces blank and expressionless. They were surrounded by technology far beyond anything humanity had ever seen: metallic structures, glowing lights, and pulsating energy fields. The images flickered, showing flashes of the children in different environments that seemed to distort and shift. Some were surrounded by other beings, their alien forms moving in a synchronized dance, as if preparing for something. Rachel's heart raced. She reached out, trying to get a closer look at her daughter, but the image on the screen was too distorted. "What is this? What have you done to them?" she demanded, her voice trembling but fierce. The alien figure's hooded face remained hidden, but the sound of its voice seemed to come from everywhere at once. "The children are being prepared for the next phase. They are essential for the survival of the universe. You, humans, are too primitive to understand. But the children, they are the link. They hold the power to bring about the future of all worlds, a power that will reshape everything. Rachel shook her head in disbelief, trying to understand. No, no, you can't take them. They're our children. Her hands clenched into fists, her nails digging into her palms. Why are you doing this? What's the real purpose behind all of this? The alien's form shifted, and its voice deepened, taking on a cold, almost sorrowful tone. The purpose is simple: survival. Your world is dying, Rachel. You may not see it, but the Earth is on the brink of collapse. You have ignored the signs for too long, and now, the children must step in. They are the future, and they must be prepared for what is to come. The fate of your species and countless others depends on them. The weight of those words hit Rachel like a physical blow. She staggered back, trying to process the implications. But they're just kids, she exclaimed, the desperation in her voice growing. How can they possibly carry such a burden? How can you expect them to save the world? The alien's voice grew more insistent, more firm. The children are not just children. They are more than you can comprehend. Their potential has been unlocked. The future is in their hands. You, as parents, cannot stop this. You cannot protect them from their destiny. Rachel's mind reeled. The future. Her daughter's future. Had she truly been chosen for something so monumental? The alien's words felt like an icy hand gripping her heart. Could she really let this happen? Could she allow her daughter to be swept away by forces beyond her control? And yet, the truth was undeniable. The alien was right. The world was changing, and the people of Earth had been blind to the signs. The environment was deteriorating, civilizations crumbling, resources becoming scarcer. Maybe the children were the only hope, even if it seemed impossible to accept. She felt torn between her desire to protect her daughter and the undeniable reality that the fate of the world rested in her small hands. A new voice suddenly echoed in the room, one that was familiar. It was Michael, the man who had led them here. He stepped forward, his face filled with determination and fear. If the children are the key to saving everything, then why did you take them? Why didn't you just show us what was happening? Why all this secrecy? The alien's glowing eyes fixed on Michael, and for a brief moment, there was a flicker of something. Something like recognition, or perhaps pity. The humans are too weak to understand. You would have never believed it. The only way to save the future was to take the children out of your reach, to prepare them where you cannot follow. You would have tried to stop it, tried to hold them back, out of fear. The room fell silent. Rachel's breath caught in her throat. The alien was right. If the children had stayed, if the knowledge of their purpose had been revealed too soon, the adults would have done everything in their power to stop it. Fear and love were powerful forces, and they would have clouded the truth. As the alien spoke, Rachel's thoughts shifted. She remembered the strange calmness she had seen in her daughter's eyes earlier, when the child had turned to her before walking away with the alien. It had been a look of peace, a look that said she understood something the adults couldn't. Maybe Rachel had been wrong all along. Maybe the children weren't being taken away from their families. They were being taken to fulfill a purpose that had been written long before any of them had been born. The alien continued, its voice softer now. You will not remember everything. But when the time comes, you will understand. The children will return, and when they do, they will have the power to save you. The words hung in the air, heavy with both promise and threat. The figure seemed to dissolve into the shadows, its form flickering and shifting until it was gone entirely. The lights in the room dimmed, leaving the group in a strange silence. Rachel stood frozen, her heart pounding, her mind spinning. The truth was now too big to ignore. Her daughter, her child, was part of something far greater than herself, part of something that might just be the salvation of the world. But what would that mean for her? For all of them? And as the group stood in the quiet room, The echoes of the aliens' words filled the space between them, hanging like a cloud of uncertainty. The future had already begun, and the children had already been chosen. The only question now was what would happen next.